Well, hello, everybody. It is your favorite day of the week. It is time for another episode of the Reality Reading Rainbow, where I talk about books written by your favorite reality stars, especially those from Bravo. I also do interviews. And today is another interview day. As you guys are probably sick of hearing about, I am on Clubhouse and I am loving Clubhouse. And part of the reason why I'm loving it is I'm getting to meet a lot of other podcasters and a lot of other people involved with Bravo, but not just that, a lot of other Black people involved with Bravo and a lot of other Black podcasters. And today is another interview day. And this is someone who she actually has her own room on Clubhouse every Thursday at 4 p.m. East Coast time and 1 p.m. Pacific time. I keep on having to remind myself because for me, it's 1 o'clock. So I have to get the times straightened out. But she was also on the TV show Camp Getaway on Bravo. And so I love talking to her because she gives us a lot of insights since she has been behind the curtain, let's say. She tells us a lot of stuff that we don't know about or that we don't realize or things that aren't obvious to us. So help me welcome my friend, Dr. Monica. Hey, Dr. Monica.
Hello, Les. Hello. I love being in rooms with you, by the way. And I love when you come in my room. Your voice to me is like magic. I really do.
Thank you. Thank you. And I really enjoy your rooms because what I love, and for those of you who have never been in Dr. Monica's room before or heard Dr. Monica on Clubhouse, what I like about your room, Dr. Monica, is since you get into the psyche and you talk more about why the Bravo celebrities are doing what they do or acting the way they act.
Ooh, that was a Freudian slip.
I know, right?
You should be on Bravo, actually, though. You actually should. I think you would probably, I can imagine. Your podcast should be a show, by the way. But not to be Dr. Monica, but let's let the psychologist come out. That's called the classic Freudian slip, and I love it. I'm here for it.
See, Dr. Monica, here's the thing, though, about me being on Bravo. I don't know how I would behave because I'm and you probably can tell me why I do this. I'm a 0 to 1,000 type person, and I wasn't like this before. But after everything that went down last year with George Floyd, with Breonna Taylor, with the Black Lives Matter movement, it brought up a lot of trauma for me that I dealt with in my life. And just to give you a little background, I grew up in Europe. I always went to private schools. I always went to expensive schools because my dad worked for the Department of Defense and they basically paid for our school.
Oh, okay. All right.
So because of this, I was always the only Black kid. And if I wasn't the only Black kid, the other Black person was my brother, who's 5 years younger. Right?
Okay. So you had to look out for him too.
Right. And so there were a lot of microaggressions that I dealt with. Now, here's the deal. In school at the time, I was very popular in my school. I was the president of the student body 2 years in a row. So on the surface, I was very popular and I had friends, but there were a lot of microaggressions that I had to deal with that didn't pop up as microaggressions until last year. Plus, on top of that, I was in a relationship for 13 years where my in-laws were super duper racist. They were white, super duper racist, super duper passive aggressive, microaggressions up the yin yang. And so
wow,
that relationship ended. I'm in another relationship now, which is the polar opposite. But all this stuff has kind of been brought up. And so now I've turned into like this 0 to 1,000 type person.
Okay.
So I don't know how I would go over on Bravo.
I think that first of all, I am not am I a 0 to 1,000 person? No, I'm not. I'm not. But I think that the 0 to 1,000 person type of personality actually does better on Bravo.
Oh.
Think about it. Like, it does better on television. It's more entertaining to watch.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's the kind of personality that, like, just the swing is going to be interesting. I think I'm a little too cerebral for it, meaning that, like, I talk through things. And even though there's a way that they like for you to talk about everything and everything is processed, I really I will talk through things, and I just am not I'm not quick to anger. When I am angry, I'm pissed. And but I'm so in some ways, and also I can hold multiple perspectives, and what plays well on television is somebody who is so stuck in their point of view that they're going to argue it until they're blue in the face and they're not going to hear you. And so in that way, I don't see you that way. So maybe you would have a hard time, but if you were close to flipping a table, they would love that. See, I wouldn't even throw a flip flop. You know what I mean? So they want something thrown.
I wouldn't flip a table. But
you'd throw a flip flop, wouldn't you?
I would throw a flip flop. And I would cuss you out.
Oh, see, I did actually cuss somebody out. They just didn't show it, but I did tell. So I listened. That took a lot. And I didn't even curse him out as much as I just was like, "Shut the fuck up." But at a very high volume.
And let's talk about this. So, this week was a very disappointing week on the Real Housewives of New York. Because of the way Ebony was treated at a dinner party, and she was called an angry Black woman at this dinner party by Luann. Now, I would be the type of person that I would be like, fuck yeah, I'm angry, and what? At least Ebony was still trying to debate and be thoughtful about her debate. I would be like, and what? Yeah, I am.
See, I would be like Ebony. I would be trying to have the conversation. When the truth is, there should be an and what. There should be an and what in real life, but it's a hard role when you are the only Black person in any white space. I'm sure if you harken back to when you were in school and had that experience, I'm sure you can imagine that there is a pressure to stop and be pensive and thoughtful and educative, as opposed to just being able to pop off and being like, yeah, I'm angry, whatever. You pissed me, you pissed me off. You can't throw a brick and expect me not to get mad.
Right.
But unfortunately, when you're in those kind of settings, it's it really reflects kind of the experience of Black people where our anger is already misunderstood. I said this in one of the rooms recently, we were talking about this, that we all know, I'm sure you've heard of the different studies that have shown that Black boys and Black girls, especially Black girls, there's just less empathy. Teachers, doctors, everybody have less empathy to Black kids. They imagine or see Black kids and think that they're older than what they are. They're less compassionate to them. And so it's our anger is not taken in the same way. And so therefore, in some ways, we have to explain our anger. And if you think about it, it's not just about trying to make them hear us or trying to not come off as a stereotype. If you go to the most extreme, it's trying not to die. Because when somebody sees you as angry and dangerous and all these other things, at the most extreme, they shoot because you're wearing a hoodie. They shoot because, you're running, it's just, they shoot because you're an 11-year-old kid with a toy gun, so it's just on some level, we are trying to also be safe in this space and also honor our feelings, if that makes sense. And I think that's what Ebony was doing in a way.
Right.
It's unfortunate because I'd like to pop off.
Yeah. Now, what were your thoughts on that whole situation?
Well, so my biggest thought was, first of all, having done, been on Bravo, and certainly had my own experiences with my cast, them saying all sorts of wild stuff, and then me also calling people out. further racism. And I think the thing that I appreciated is that like Bravo has shifted gears a bit, clearly, where they are now they now have the philosophy that at least showing more of these conversations are important. I wish that I still could have seen the unedited version of it, because I'm sure we didn't get all of it, but at least we're getting more of it. It's a hard balance for them because they want to also protect their assets in a way,
Right.
And I'd be curious to see like what else did Luann say. I'd be curious to see what else did Ramona do. I'd be curious to see like what else Sonia and Heather did. But like Bravo is also going to protect its assets because I'm sure more stuff went on. And the other thing is I wish so I'm glad that they're showing more of the conversation because it had such an impact for at least the room that we had on the next day. So many Black women came to the stage. Black people came and said that I saw this and this reflected my life. These reflected moments that I experience every day. Somebody said they just experienced it earlier that day. So for me, I think that like Bravo recognizing that there are multiple stories that should be told is great. Now, the part that I wish that like bothered me, that I wish there was more of, is like showing. Like, like when we watch it, we were like, yeah, you go, Ebony, and being strong. And to me, that fits the stereotype that like, we're not penetrable, that it doesn't hurt, that we're vulnerable. And I think that like, maybe we'll get it next week, but I don't think we saw like perhaps the hurt and the sense of disillusionment or like confusion or whatever that I'm sure Ebony was experiencing, because racism is violence. It hurts. It really hurts. And when you're the only person of color in a space where there's microaggressions and aggressions happening, it's painful. And I know she must have felt pained. And I hope that people will not just see her as like, oh, she's fierce and she's tough and this and that, and she's smart and whatever. I want people to see, wow, this hurts when people do these things. This is a very painful experience for a Black woman.
Now, here's something, and this is crazy. All right. I didn't realize until I started listening to you on Clubhouse and hearing you talk in the different rooms. I never associated dealing with racism as dealing with a trauma.
Oh yeah, racism is a trauma. The racial trauma is a real thing. It's not a separate diagnosis from PTSD, but it is now what we consider to be oh my God, I can't even think of the word, but it's it's a qualifier. It's like an actual thing that we say that this is a type of trauma, racial trauma, and any form of racial discrimination is considered something that can cause trauma. And I'm talking about from like, violence, witnessing violence, to something, discrimination in any setting, to social racism, i.e. like microaggressions. All of that stuff is still racism. And when it lands, it's like getting punched in the gut, getting punched in the teeth. Like it's a drive-by sometimes when you're least expecting it. And that's when it can hurt the worst. And so, but it is traumatizing. It shakes us to the core. And the thing is, when you're a Black person in the world, let alone in the United States, we're always experiencing microaggressions, like every day. Like if you leave your house and walk and take the train or something like that to your job, by the time you enter into your doors and you're supposed to put on a smile and be all peppy with your coworkers, you probably have encountered like all sorts of different types of microaggressions, whether it's somebody grabbing their purse to pull it closer to them, like the barista, like calling somebody behind you because they think that you're not waiting. It's just like really random small things. People like not like stepping aside on the sidewalk for you to go by, even though they're in your lane. Like, there's so many subtle things that even if you're not like, people like to say, oh, you look for racism. And like, I've heard that being said to me before. And I'm like, no, I'm not. I just don't deny it anymore, because denying it the same way you deny other types of trauma is when it hurts you even more. It's like, you're just like taking it in. You don't challenge yourself of this made me feel terrible. This is not okay. This is not how I should be treated. Then what you do instead is you attach yourself to the narrative of this, like, well, what did I do? Maybe I should have done something different. No, you didn't do anything. You just were Black.
Right. It's like, mistakenly wearing a red shirt and going to Target, that's happened to me before.
Listen, Les, once I was in sweats and it was a nicer store, but I literally was in sweats in a nice clothing store. And somebody came up to me and I looked at this woman and I was like, what about me other than the color of my skin makes you think I work here? Look at the people who are working here. Look how I'm dressed.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
They were all wearing like polished clothes. I'm in gym clothes.
And then you get the, oh, well, don't be so sensitive. I was only, and it's just like, fuck off.
Right. Well, see, the thing is, I'm gonna tell you, Les, I adopted this thing years ago when I was in graduate school. My boss, who was a white woman at the time, like, I was telling her about how somebody on worked the grounds, like, said something, like, made a sexist joke, and I was like, and it made me feel really uncomfortable. She was like, well, what did you say to him? And I was like, nothing. And she was like, so you let him say that to you? You didn't say anything? And I was like, yeah, I didn't want to make it weird. And she was like, okay, so it's okay though that he made you feel uncomfortable, so uncomfortable that you're still talking about it now, and he's just going off and living his life, as opposed to saying something in the moment and letting him be uncomfortable and having to think about it. And that has always stuck with me. So my attitude is, I am not about to be the only person uncomfortable up in here.
You know what? I never thought of it that way before. You just opened, I never thought of it that way before.
I'm like, I am not going to be the only person stressed out about this. I'm not going to be the only person thinking about this. I'm not. And half the time I don't even say you're being racist. I will just simply say, the way you treated me or talked to me or whatever you did made me feel uncomfortable. I don't know you. Don't know what's in your heart, but I'm going to tell you this is what experience. And I have no other thing to make sense of it other than the fact that I'm the only Black person here.
You know what? You've changed the way that I'm going to think about this from now on.
Right. Well, that's what happened in the clubhouse room yesterday when
Let's talk about
somebody was rebutting. Yeah, somebody. So like there was the moment that I decided to really truly like leave the conversation, because the conversation was frustrating. It was like, white people white-splaining racism to the people of color on the stage. And I later found out that a lot of the people of color were feeling really frustrated and felt kind of like it was hard to step in and say anything because, basically what was happening is like, it was kind of what was happening was mirroring what happened on the episode of The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, where like all the white people were saying, oh, I'm not racist. And I've never heard that this is a stereotype that Southern people are racist. And I never feel the need to prove that I'm not racist because I'm just not racist. Sutton, you're the one who's weird. And it's like, even in the group, we're still like, they were trying to separate and push themselves away from Sutton and do the same thing of like, I've never heard, what? White people be racist? Like, it was very weird. And I spoke to that. And then at one point, and I challenged people, somebody from Atlanta, I was like, ask them. And really my thing was, they kept asking each other, all the white women in the group.
Right.
Ask Garcelle. Ask the Black woman, has she heard of this stereotype? Ask the Black woman if she thinks that all of you guys are not racist or shouldn't be questioning yourself. I was like, ask her. I was like, because you guys are all saying this among yourselves. Meanwhile, we're saying something different. Ask me. Yes, we've heard this stereotype.
And just to set it up a little bit.
Yes.
Just a little bit. So basically what Dr. Monica is talking about is on Real Housewives of Beverly Hills this past week, there was a discussion between Crystal, who was Asian, and Sutton, who was white, because Sutton told Crystal that she didn't see color, and Crystal called her out on it for good reason.
Well, no, Crystal said to her, "You don't tell me you're one of those people who doesn't see color." She never even, Sutton never said it. She just responded to it.
You're correct. You're correct.
Yeah. Which is also important, by the way.
Right. And so basically Sutton, went into a tizzy and threw out white girl tears. And, so that's what we were talking about in the room. And so that's how this conversation came up.
Right. And Sutton was very defensive afterwards and felt like, and she was saying, she kind of pulled what Sonia has also done when she was drunk. Like, I don't, I feel like I'm going to have to defend myself. I don't want people to think of me as racist. I know that people might make that assumption because I'm from the South. I'm a white woman, and like that's a stereotype of like white Southerners, that we're all racist. And then the rest of the group kind of like didn't join in or acknowledge that. They basically said, we don't know what you're talking about. The rest of the white women in the cast were like, we don't know what you're talking about. We've never heard that. that's shocking. I've never heard that. And I was watching the screen like, are you y'all kidding me? And as the group was happening yesterday in Clubhouse, I thought to myself, are y'all kidding me? Because they were echoing the same thing. People from the Deep South, somebody from Texas was saying that he had never heard that stereotype. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And what was more telling is some of them were saying, among my family and my friends who were all white, we've never heard that stereotype. So I naturally said, just like they should have done last night, you should ask a Black person.
Right. Because I've heard that stereotype. And as I was telling you off air, I didn't even grow up in the States and I heard about that stereotype.
Right. Listen, everybody's heard the stereotype that Southerners are racist, like white Southerners are racist. They just have all heard it. That's like the stereotype that all Southerners are dumb, or blondes are dumb, and or all Black women are angry, Black men are criminals. It doesn't mean it's true, but it is a stereotype.
Right.
And it has an impact.
Right. And the thing is that got me about Sutton is even if she would have said what she said and then listened to Crystal and then said, oh, okay, I never thought of it that way before, or okay, thank you for sharing this, and kept the tears out of it, I wouldn't have had an issue with the conversation. Right. But the fact that, she made it about her, she turned it into a catastrophe and started crying. Then I was like, well, screw you, Sutton. And I liked Sutton. So
Right. And I saw it differently. And you said that. And I remember what I said is that I saw Sutton having a reaction that I feel like is just a typical reaction to being called out for racism, or like being called out for because what Sutton did by saying I don't see color, I don't think that that's racism as much as I think of like when I say racism, it's not like saying to a Black woman you're angry Black woman. What Sutton did is said, basically like she responded to somebody saying, oh, don't tell me you're the kind of person that sees color. So that's a microaggression. She basically said to her, no, I don't see color. It's still racist, as I said before, but it wasn't as overt. And, and the intention of Sutton, she wasn't thinking about like this where the racism is. She wasn't thinking about Crystal and Crystal's experience. She was only trying to defend hers, which is what white people tend to do in these situations, what anybody does. Like I was telling somebody earlier, I can remember like being like maybe 21, 22, where my roommate and somebody who like my best friend, somebody I considered to be like family, we were having a conversation and he had come out to me like 2 years before. And, we were having a conversation in a restaurant. I think it was a gay bar in DC. And I said something and he experienced it as being homophobic. And at the time I like argued. I was very defensive and got really upset and we didn't talk for a couple of days and we're roommates. And, and I just like was very defensive. And it was probably about 5-6 years later that we were talking about it and I brought up and I was like, yeah, I'm really sorry. I wasn't aware. I just didn't know. I didn't understand. But, going to graduate school, becoming a psychologist and just continuing to have more experiences with gay people, like I just like realized, oh, yeah, it doesn't matter if I'm Black or whatever, I can still be homophobic, right? And I can, or even when my intentions are to be homophobic, what I say has an impact. And Sutton, that's all that was, but Sutton couldn't do it.
Right. And the thing is, it's like, of course, people don't think you're racist, Sutton. Your best friend on this cast is the Black person on the cast.
And Sutton was the only person that really went out of her way to befriend Garcelle. Right.
And we saw that. And obviously you can tell that they have an organic,
genuine,
real friendship. So you can take that one out of the equation, Sutton, because that's not the first thing that pops into my head is that you're a racist because you're, and this doesn't even fall into some of my best friends are Black category. This is like, she's your genuine friend. So.
Right. I think the thing is that like, maybe if Garcelle had said that to Sutton would have listened, or maybe it would have been a different conversation. Even if Garcelle had said it the way that Crystal did, I think it was because this is the thing. All right, let me slow down because I'm now getting ahead of myself. what is fascinating about these shows now, or these shows having integrated cast, is because it's really reflecting real moments and real conversations that happen in real life. And the truth is that like Sonia and Sutton, to me, feel like they're kind of cut from the same cloth, right? They're the one, like Sonia was like, I don't want to be canceled. She was scared. I don't want to say the wrong thing. I don't want people to think I'm racist. I don't want to like lose like my standing on the show. I'm really nervous about that. Sutton, she was like, oh, I don't know. I don't want to talk. I don't want to do that. I don't see race, whatever. Whereas everybody else was just kind of like, you know, cutting through it. And Kyle listened, which was great. But also Garcelle didn't attack her. She just said, this is my experience. But in that moment, I thought to myself, it seems like Sutton and Sonia are the only two people on some level acknowledging that there has been an important change in this cast, and that race is now an issue. Right. That to me is like your first step to being anti-racist or not racist, right?
Right.
That's how I saw it. Whereas the other women, what they did is to me even more racist, which is that they said we're not racist. This thing I don't even know what you're talking about, as opposed to leaving space to say, yeah, we all want to say like we don't see color. Yeah, we all feel afraid that like people might see us as racist. That would have been a much more powerful conversation and moment.
Right. And always to me, the most powerful thing is when you talk to someone or they have that conversation. And even Kyle, to an extent, when Garcelle broke it down to her, Kyle was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know that. Now I know that. And now she has a chance to do better, you know?
Right.
And I think if more people did that, I think that the reason why people get canceled is because stuff is pointed out to them. They double down. And then when they realize, oh shit, I need to go the other way and take this in, it's too late. And they've already doubled down and they've already said the stupid shit. And so you can't, you know, what's the saying? You can't go unring a bell. What you say is what you say. So you can't go back now and say, oops.
Right.
So, you know, and the funny thing is, I'm not even really a Kyle fan, but I was like, okay, that's how you do it. Right. That's how you do it. You take it in, you apologize, and the conversation with them, it was done. It was done.
Well, what if Garcelle had said, you're racist? How do you think that conversation would
Well, okay. Oh, to Kyle, like, Kyle would have gotten defensive.
Right. What did Crystal do to Sutton?
True. Okay, yeah, you're right. And she didn't come out and say it, but she implied it.
Right, but she said, you're this person.
That's right. Okay.
And remember how I said, when I confront racism, I don't say to somebody, you're racist. I don't, because I don't know somebody. All I can say is your behavior landed in a way that makes me see this. I experienced it this way. Right. So, and that's what Garcelle did. She talked about her experience of Kyle.
And so this is a question for you, because I'm learning. I'm learning how to have conversations. So thank you for this, because I hate the word teachable moment. I hate it. But I'm learning.
Right. I see. The thing is, it's not even about teachable. I'm like, I want you to be uncomfortable. I want you to hear and take in what I'm saying, and I want you to lose sleep over it. Thanks. Yes.
So what if Garcelle said, instead, like, if she didn't say you're a racist, but if she said, I thought what you did is racist, is that the same? Or
I think what she had said, I think that like anytime you say that, I think you should be prepared for people to get defensive. And that's not fair. Like sometimes when somebody is racist, I will say, I feel like that was racist. Yes, I will absolutely say that. But when I don't know somebody, right? When I really truly don't know somebody, I don't know what's in their heart. I just know to my experience, and I will speak to my experience, and I will like do everything short but say racist. If somebody says, are you calling me racist? I will say to them, I'm not calling you anything. I'm saying what your behavior, how I experienced it and how it landed on me. Because usually, even if you just describe it, people will say, are you calling me racist? And I'm like, I didn't use that word, but you know, based on my experience of what you did and the fact that I'm the only Black person in the room, there's nothing else I have to go on other than this, that this is racist. Well, I'm not racist. How dare you come around? Once again, I didn't call you anything. Again, I'm like, I'm not taking this on. This is your thing to struggle with. And that's the easiest way to deal with it. If Crystal had said that, like, okay, Sutton, I don't know you, but I'm hearing this and this is hard. And I'm feeling like a bit like, because of that, like it makes it hard for me to connect. Like there's, Garcelle did it differently, and like Ebony did it differently. And that's why I said, also, I think that's when you start to get into the subtle differences of like among people of color. Because, some people will say people of color and then they'll say, but if you're just talking about something, you really need to distinguish Black people, because the experience of racism towards Black people in these more social situations tend to be much more worse, right? Because there is a stereotype of model of like the model minorities, which is attached to Asian. It's limiting, but it also can be beneficial. Now, right now, like the violence against AAPI people is like, I mean, it's so, I think it changes the conversation, because I think we have to acknowledge the level of violence, but I think that's also still driven by stereotypes too, and so I'm going to say like the increase of it, like being, this idea of like, Corona, but then also like, seeing Asian Americans or Asian people as being more passive and therefore easier to overtake. All of that stuff is still driven by stereotypes, right?
Right.
For Crystal, and maybe Crystal, like maybe she didn't want to be experienced as being passive, and so she decided to be much more aggressive. I don't know. But the problem is that like it didn't leave, like, like Sutton, like her behavior to me became problematic when she became so defensive. But I don't know if there's any other, like, I wouldn't respond defensively, but like I expected a white person would. To me, I didn't feel like Sutton was doing something that was so shocking or so out of the gates. And I'm sure my hunch is that Kyle, because Kyle's first response was like, no, I would have done that. She couldn't hear it until Garcelle was like, well, let me explain to you and explain the history. Crystal didn't really, she tried to explain it, but like at that point, she had already said that Sutton, you're a racist, basically.
Right. And Crystal, because I live in LA, and so Crystal she said she's from Northridge. Right. So Northridge, I would say, is primarily it's a diverse area, but it's primarily Latin and Asian.
Okay.
And so, and it's like a middle class.
Right, and it's a college town too, right?
Yeah. Cal State Northridge is right there. So I could see her experience being a little different as far as like speaking up, and her being the type of person that would speak up, because that just makes sense where, for her being from Northridge,
Right.
And the thing is, also, I can get to, since her husband is really successful, and I could see her in the circles that she runs in, I could see her being one of the very few Asians, or one of the only Asians in the room.
Yeah, and probably experiencing a lot of microaggressions, and probably has a little trauma. So she might have been reacting out of trauma too, of like, not this again. She could have been doing that too, right? Because like racial trauma, just like any trauma, it makes you what we call hypervigilant. This experience of like, there's a higher level of vigilance in your environment. And when you get triggered, it makes you go from like 0 to 1,000, actually.
Yeah.
And Crystal went from 0 to 1,000.
And I remember like when I was in that relationship with the racist parents, here's the deal. A lot of times they wouldn't be overt, but I always felt it. I always knew my gut was always talking to me. Always. But then it kind of fell into gaslighting territory, because it's like, what are you talking about? No, it's you. No, you're imagining this. No, you're being dramatic.
Who said this to you? Your ex said this to you?
My ex.
Say that to you? Oh, yeah. I'm glad you dumped his behind then.
And then it turned out I was right the entire time.
Yeah, of course.
And I felt it the entire time. And that was kind of when I made the promise to myself, I'm never going down that road again. Oh no.
Right.
And so, what I was going to say too is when it comes to people, sometimes I think that, and I'll use Sutton as an example, her saying, I don't see color, and this is just a hypothetical, sometimes I put people in a camp of, hey, maybe they just don't know. And so I can't cancel her because maybe she just doesn't know and needs this explained to her. Does that make sense?
Yeah, listen, when people have said that to me, and I'm talking about people have said that to me even more recently, and when they do, you know how Stephanie from Mocha Minutes, she'll take that big sigh of like, kind of thing, you know, she does that.
Right.
I feel like I've had to do that when it comes to this particular topic too, because I've had people say that to me, and when they do, I'm just like, oh God. But I'm aware of who's saying it. It is people who are like, you know, granted, I'm in my early 40s, but it's like people who are in their late 40s and 50s. It's like the early Gen X. I'm a late Gen X, very late Gen X. I feel like it's the people who are like right after the boomers when we really did grow. It was about being colorblind. It wasn't about like, you know, being you know, diverse. It was really about like everybody's all the same. And there was some benefit to that as kids, but it doesn't take into account the fact that now we are living very different experiences. So I get it. I don't, when I, you know, and it does shut down the conversation, but like in those moments, what I typically do is I ask people, what do they mean?
Okay. See, I'm writing this one down too. That's another one.
Yeah.
That's
I come from a place of curiosity because I don't want to go in and like be corrective or go in and, you know, and have a conversation and like, I want to make sure I really understand where somebody's coming from because I want to know, are they just ignorant and don't realize, are they nervous, or are they actually being racist?
Right.
And it's usually the explanation will check them for a moment and make them have to think harder.
Right. And that's like another thing in my experience, because my husband is white, but he's not American either.
Okay.
And so there's just certain things that like he'll ask me, like he's never said anything racist, thank God. But there's just thank God. But sometimes he'll ask me something and ask, why is that a problem? And I'm like, oh wow, he really just doesn't know.
He just know. Yeah, exactly. And I do feel like there's sometimes people just really truly don't know. Also, that's because on some level, I think it's a choice that they haven't learned, because I do think that like if you're lucky enough to go to college, for instance, in the United States, like you make a choice of where you go. And if you decide to go to some Bible college in like, I don't know, whatever, Texas or Oklahoma, you're also making a decision to not be around people of color.
Right.
And then if you do go to a state school of wherever state you're from, there are going to be more people of color. But if you choose not, if you still for some reason leave there with no friendships, you know, then that's also a choice. So on some level, there is a choice. And that's how I talk to people about it. Like, if you don't have any Black friends, at some point you have to acknowledge that that's a choice.
Right.
And the reason why, going back to Sutton, the reason why I was like, I just actually am not against Sutton. And I don't think Sutton's racist, because Sutton's the only person that can say that she was friends with a Black woman on gas.
Right.
She made that choice. The other women made a choice to not be her friend. Oh, you're frozen.
And and I agree with you, because I don't think Sutton's a racist either. Yeah, I don't think she's racist. Like I said, the tears is where she lost.
She's a
white. She would have just kind
she's
of
a white woman. She's a white woman who got called racist. Yeah. But you know, it's interesting.
I guess I should be more compassionate. I should be more compassionate about the whole thing.
I mean, listen, you don't have to be compassionate. I like compassion, whatever. I don't know if you look like you might be frozen.
Dr. Monica?
Can you hear me okay? Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we froze for a second. Okay.
Okay, good.
Okay.
So I don't actually, you know, like, I don't know if you need to be compassionate. I think if anything. Oh, are you frozen again? I think you might be frozen again. I wonder what's going on. Is it on me?
Dr. Monica?
I don't think it's me, but I'm not sure. I have a good signal.
We froze again. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to shut my camera off and see if that makes a difference.
I love this thing. Does it make a difference
thank
on
you.
your end? Yeah, I love the drawing.
Yeah, because sometimes people are like, if you're having an issue like that, if you shut the camera off, it takes less whatever.
The PPUs.
So, and that's the cool thing about editing, is I can edit this stuff out.
Absolutely.
So, let's talk about the Sutton thing again. So you were saying that the reason she was crying because she's a white woman who was accused of being racist. So I get that.
Right.
I get that, and I get it's, and I guess I can get the other side of things too, is with the people being canceled, you do get canceled.
Right. That's what I'm saying. To me, Sutton and Sonia were the most real folks when it comes to this, because they are acknowledging the realities of this. They're acknowledging that there is this new entity and that they're scared because they recognize their being white means something.
Right. And this is how I honestly feel about the cancellation of people. And I'm going to admit this. There's a part of me that is happy about it only on the end of, oh my God, it's about time people aren't letting people get away with this shit anymore.
I agree. I don't have a problem with cancel culture. I don't, especially not around race. I just don't. Mm-hmm. Go ahead. But
no, I was going to say, but sometimes I do worry that if it gets out of hand, the wrong people will get canceled.
Right. Yeah, I think sometimes, I think the thing is, when it comes to cancel culture, when I say canceled, I guess, I don't, like, do I think that, say, for instance, Stassi should have been fired from, what's the name of the show, Vanderpump Rules? Yeah, I think Vanderpump Rules fired. And I think she probably should have lost some of her platform. Yeah, but she should have done that. That should have happened a while ago. And I just saw it as like, do we really need another, white girl calling herself basic and talking about, lattes in her outfits and then saying really racist stuff? No, bye. Go be a happy, mom and do your thing, or like find your audience some other place, but don't give her a platform for the whole world. Like, no, bye. So that's how I think of like cancel culture. But like, I anticipate that if I continue to speak in public settings and public platforms, I'm going to say something at some point that's going to be offensive, hurtful, land on somebody in a way that might, that might make it hard for them to like, to perhaps like want to hear anything else that I have to say. I think that that's like the nature of the beast when you take the risk to speak. And I think that like, if people like that, like when moments like that, if somebody gets canceled, that's a problem. But when somebody has like a standing pattern of doing very offensive behaviors, doing things that are like anti, humanistic, I guess, like anything that falls into like any of the social justice categories, if they have a marked history, they should be canceled. Like, we should not be giving them platforms to say and do things that are hurtful to people at all.
Right.
That's how I feel.
So I have another question for you. So there's been a talk. Were you on that performative activism?
I came in for a little bit. I was on vacation in Miami, but I told Brandon, I was like, I'm going to come through. So I came through and talked a little for about, I was on the stage for about 15 minutes before I had to go into the club and keep my little Sunday party evening going.
Now, I find it, and that's another thing that because I was on that panel, and that was another thing up until that panel that I had never thought about. And once that gate has been unleashed, I'm seeing it everywhere. Because my new big pet peeve is fellow podcasters who claim to be allies and have Black people on their show and talk this great big game. But then when Bravo throws out a distraction, they're the first one.
I feel like I've seen it. I feel like I've seen some of this.
Yeah. I'll tell you who it is. Okay. Off camera.
Okay, but I feel like I know who it is. I might message you and you can be like, yes. Go ahead.
So that's become my new biggest pet peeve, because now what I'm noticing, and this podcast is a fairly new podcast. This podcast is probably I think it's like 6 months old. It's not that old.
Okay, then it's probably not what I thought it is then. Okay.
Oh, no. Oh, no, it's it probably is who we're thinking about. Probably thinking about the same person.
Okay.
But I was just saying this because I am noticing that there aren't so there are people now in the podcast world giving all these bravo anti-racist statements and making all these statements and talking about anti-racism, but I have yet to see a Black podcaster interviewed to get their thoughts.
That's interesting.
And put it this way, until I joined Clubhouse, I had no idea that there were so many other Black Bravo podcasters out there.
Right. Wow. That's wild. I mean, listen, I didn't really follow any. I mean, what I do for a living, I don't really get a chance to listen to podcasts. I try to listen to podcasts when I have off times, but you know how some people can put in their earbuds, listen to podcasts and do their work. Right. If I were to do that, my patients would be like, what the hell is wrong with you? So I can't do that.
So here's my question to you. How did you end up getting involved with Bravo?
So I was going to say, I only found out that there were so many Black people that support and stand for Bravo and talk about Bravo after they were trying to support me based on what they were witnessing, even though on the show, they didn't show some me actually naming and speaking the experiences that they were witnessing and talking about in their cast. But so I've gone to camp for years, right? And I started working there a few years back. And I can even remember, before I started working there, saying to David, the owner, look, this place is crazy. You guys should do a show here. And people have come and tried to do shows at camp or try to pitch it. And the previous owners always said no. And then I don't know if you remember, there was the show Princesses Long Island when they were supposed to be going to the Jewish camp where everybody's single. Okay, that was what we used to call the J weekend or the Tribe weekend. So it's specifically Jewish singles weekend at camp. Actually, Camp Getaway / Camp Getaway. They have a weekend for them. They used to have 2 of them per summer, but and so they wanted the cast to come and film them that weekend. And so they said it was a rainstorm. There was no rainstorm. It's just that they couldn't figure out the contracts with David to do it. And so David just was no. And so they pretended there was a storm. Isn't that wild?
Yeah, it is.
So camp has been on different radars for a while. And so finally this tiny production company that's usually they do documentaries. They came to David and they were pitching it. And David, I think, finally decided to take the bait, and decided to go with it. And they came and they met everybody that worked there, including me. And I think from the very beginning, David was like, you guys should probably have Monica because, I'm a lot of fun in real life. Have a good time. And, despite the fact that my cast kind of for the most part hated me, I'm pretty beloved there. A lot of people like me, guests love me. And a lot of the people that work there really like me. And people talk to me and I know all sorts of secrets, And so, so they wanted me to do it. And, we went and I was my attitude was oh, yes, until I get to a place I want to say no. Right. So I just kind of stuck with it. And then they did a sizzle pilot or they did a sizzle reel. Bravo loved it. And then, and I know that they just they liked me. And so I think that they were who is this? Right. Black woman who likes to be out in the woods, right. Black woman who likes to be out in the woods, who's silly and has a good time. And she's also a doctor at Harvard. I think that they just didn't know how to make sense to me. Meanwhile, in my head is yes, that's what I'm Black. That's what we do. Right. Because I do think there's all different ways of being Black. So so then they decided after they did a sizzle, they brought in a larger production company, Haymaker Production, which does Southern Charm. And decided to try to do a show together. And that's when I think the show became a little bit more Hollywood. And then they ended up casting the show. And naturally that changes the dynamics a little bit. Whereas prior to the show that got sold was a show about people who just really loved each other, loved each other's company, like I look at like family karma, it's like people that have known and worked with each other for a while, and that we laugh with each other, we hold each other accountable, we can tease each other. That's what it was. And unfortunately, when it got casted, that's what we got instead, was like more of like a Hollywood kind of a blend of a show where it just didn't have the same heart. And and I was nervous about doing it less. I really was. Like prior, when I was doing like my interviews with like, the top people at Bravo, I said to them, I was like, I'm really nervous about doing this. Like I'm a Black woman. If you guys try to like edit me in a way where I look extra sassy or whatever, I'm going to lose. And I was like, you guys really aren't going to have to edit me that much. I speak my mind. I'm going to say, I'm not going to hold anything back. I don't I don't talk about people behind their backs. I'm going to say it to their face. But if you try to make it extra or bigger and, as opposed to giving me like allowing me to dress or allowing me to speak for myself, I'm going to lose, because the consciousness of America is so racist that like if I don't have an opportunity to be seen and heard, I am going to lose. And I don't want to do that, because it's not just me that's losing. It's Black people who are going to be watching the show, or who even aren't watching, who are going to be losing, who are going to lose. They're not going to be able to find themselves in me. They're not going to, or they're going to find the same stereotype or narrative in me. And I was like, if I'm going to do this, I want to feel like I'm doing this with meaning, that like people are going to be like, oh, there's a Black woman that likes to be in the woods, which is meaningful, because Black people were not allowed to go to national parks, for the longest time. I mean, so it's like, it was important to me. So that's how I ended up doing it. In the end, some of, my fears were indeed true. And there's a part of me that feels a bit naive. But, I don't have any regrets of doing it. And I'm still at camp. So, and the people that they casted aren't.
Oh, wow. Okay, that's cool. So you're going to do it again this summer.
Yeah, I was there for Memorial Day. I was there for Memorial Day. That's why my voice is a little raspier. Yeah. So like I was there for Memorial Day. It's been weird going back post the show. Definitely like people come. I think it's great that people like are excited to be there, and to like, having had the show there. And it's nice that people are excited to meet me. But at the same time, it's also really bizarre, because like, it's now like, I think that the rest of like our real crew, like, I think it's like a little bit weird. I think in some ways they felt quite left out of the process, and I agree that they were. So it's been a bit of an awkward re-entry, but and like this is like my third. I went to camp twice last year. Like, it was very, very much smaller, and they did they did COVID testing and stuff for us to go. But like this year it was bigger, and it's been interesting, and and I think the filming of the show like really has changed a lot. It's changed my perspective on things. But yeah, I mean, like I kind of wanted there to be a second season for one reason only, Les, because I do think learning how to be on reality TV is a learning curve. And I feel like I learned how to do it differently, and I would have done it differently the second season. I would have really, really said things. I would have gone in David's office, knocked on his door, and been like, you need to fire so-and-so. Let me tell you what he said. I would have forced things to be, as much as I possibly could, I would have forced things to really, truly been explicitly on screen. Right. But in my everyday life, I'm not trying to get in people's business. I'm not trying to get anybody fired. I feel like we're all adults, but like for the purpose of television, like Bethany, I would have mentioned it all. I would have mentioned it all, for real. I was like ready to go. Let's do this.
And so, first of all, because I watched some episodes of it, I would totally go.
You need to go. I'm trying to plan a Club Bravo weekend, actually.
Because that is something that's up my alley, actually. All that stuff, I'm quirky that way. So I would be all over it. And it's so funny because speaking of Jewish camp, so my sister raised her kids Jewish. Like my niece, who was a lesbian rabbi at Yale, she met her now wife at summer camp when they were like camp counselors, when they were like 14 or 15, and like ended up getting married and stuff. And so I know, like,
cute.
So So like the Jewish week you were talking about, I'm like, wow, that probably would have been a lot of fun. Because I know even my sister and they're like, they get involved too. Like it's a family thing. And if your family goes and volunteers, you get a discount. So yeah, my sister and her whole family go, and they've been going for years. So it's like, I've been hearing.
Well, you should get them to go to this camp because they definitely have family camp weekends too. So you and your family, you have a son, right?
A daughter.
Or daughter. Okay. I thought you adopted it. I know you recently adopted it, but so, all right, you could bring you and you and your husband can bring your daughter with your sister and, their kids like to camp. It would be fun. It's fun.
Because the thing is, because I'm the type too, like camping in a tent, and I'm not, like, I've done it. I've experienced it. I don't get what the big deal is. But camping in like a cabin or a lot, like I'm all over that. I'm fine.
Right. Happy hour, getting dressed up for parties every night, right? Yeah.
So we're winding down, but before we wind down, I just thought of a question.
Yes.
So since you have experience with being on a show, you know what goes on behind the scenes. You basically know how the sausage is made. How would you recommend that a viewer like me who does not have any of that knowledge, how would you recommend that we watch the show? Because I'm sure that you watch reality TV a different way than I would. So what would your tips be? What is going on that we aren't seeing, let's say?
Right. So I would say first of all, I would watch the show smarter than like how the show was, like watch the show from a place that's smarter than what the story creators were trying to, like how they pegged you for being able to watch the show. Like if you see something that feels like way too typical, like, oh, this person is this person is that person, this person is the villain, this person is the good guy. Like when you start to watch that and you get caught up in those roles, are starting to easily peg people in those roles, I would like let them be in those roles, but have a little bit of doubt. I would say that, you should just know that there are probably, like, if you're watching a show and you just have an overwhelmingly like sense of frustration and you're saying to yourself, why didn't they just say this? Why didn't they just do that? Or why didn't whatever? The reality is they probably did. It just like is more interesting to not show that part because it's like reality shows, like they're supposed to be reality, right? And in some ways, like they are reality. The part that makes it scripted is the fact that like people then cut it up to create stories, right? That's the difference. So it's like it has to be better than what's happening in real life. It has to have something that's like a cliffhanger or something that gets you emotionally engaged. So when you find yourself saying, well, why didn't they just say this? Why didn't they just do that? They probably did.
So basically then, because you always hear the editing. So is that basically pretty much right on then when people are saying the editing?
Yeah, listen, the thing is they can only use what you say, right? They can only use like the words that come out of your mouth. They can only use it, but how they put that in the context or like leaving out the key things that are associated with it, all of that stuff they can do. And they're going to do because ultimately their job is to create a show that they believe is going to be interesting to the masses. Now, at the time of filming our show and at the time of putting together our show, and even after the time the show was like being aired, and from the beginning, mind you, I was very clear that I think it's going to be really important to have a show that also shows a clear point of view of a Black woman, since I'm on here. And I think that like they missed that mark. And I think that unfortunately they really in particular missed it at a time when if they had shown it, they would have been the only show on reality show on television that was integrated. And that also was giving voice to like allowing a Black woman to actually be portrayed in the way that was more authentic to who she was. Like they would have allowed me to speak to my experience as a Black woman. Now they're doing it. But at the time, that wasn't considered like an entertaining story. It really was. The idea was racism, and talking about racism is not entertaining.
So, and here's another question that just popped up, and this is your, this is your opinion. So these shows are now showing the racism when they don't have to. Like, they showed the Tiffany being treated like shit. They're showing the Ebony.
Well, they didn't show Tiffany being treated like shit intentionally. I think that they weren't even aware that was happening. That's
what I was going to ask you. That's what I was going to ask you is.
No, I think that Tiffany, I don't think that it's just like Garcelle, like when I saw Kyle, like when I watched the season of Beverly Hills, when Garcelle was on, I heard Garcelle saying, like, I don't think you haven't gotten to know me. We're not really friends. I heard Garcelle saying, you don't have time for me. Like, I heard it from a Black woman's point of view of like, you're othering me and you're leaving me out. I heard that. They never allowed her to say that last season. They edited it around that. And Tiffany, I felt like they were doing the same thing. Like, like they edited, her, like them making fun of it, but they were like editing it like Tiffany is too opulent to do this and do that. But they, like, we as viewers caught it in this way. And I think that's why the cast was surprised. And I think on some level, Bravo was surprised with people's response to the show and how angry and upset they were.
Okay. And then what I'm noticing though, is now when it's come to Ebony, I'm not feeling that same, I'm angry about it, but I'm not feeling that same energy surrounding the stuff that went on with Ebony that went on with Tiffany. Like, stuff is being said, but it's not nearly as fervent as what was said with Tiffany. Do you think?
Right, because they're showing Ebony, they're actually showing the moments that Ebony is upset about. They're showing like the microaggression that's being said. And so like, I actually have had the, like even when I was filming my show and the show was being edited, I harkened back to the show. I think it was Timber Creek Lodge, where they had a Black woman who was like in charge, and they basically ran this woman off the show.
Yeah.
I don't know if y'all remember, but like, I just thought to myself, I don't like, if you create a show where I'm just the bad guy and you never actually like allow me to like, you don't show that I'm actually speaking to like what I think is going on. Also, that it's also that like white people have a hard time with a Black woman being in charge, or white people have a hard time with a Black woman being more direct. Not even as direct as Crystal was, but just more direct. Like, if you guys aren't, like, it's not going to make sense and people are just not going to like. And in my head, I think that, with the racial reckoning that happened in the last year, it's now being demanded that television shows these more complete stories, or else they'll get canceled. Bravo will get canceled, right? But I think, and I think Bravo on some level is trying. I think there's some people that have their heart in the right places. Right. But at the same time, as I've said before, I think these things are also happening in the context of like the white gaze, which means that like there's always going to be a limit on what they're able to see when the people who are truly making the decisions are always going to have the same point of view or come from the same background, the same way that like these women on Beverly Hills all kind of got together and said, I've never heard of that. Racism doesn't exist in this way. What are you talking about? I'm not worried about it. And then the people who watched them did the exact same thing in this other form. What are you talking about? Right. Again, like that's what happens when it's time to like put together these stories. And now they're all like, okay, well, we know we have to show this, or we want to talk, we want to do it, but they still don't have the awareness and the sophistication to go a little bit deeper. And I think with Tiffany, they weren't even aware that that's what was happening. They weren't even aware of it. And I think that's why Andy really couldn't even get into the meat of it, when they were doing the reunion. But the truth is, my experience now having done this is like, this kind of thing had to have been happening even back like during the Timber Creek Lodge. And it makes me sad for her. And I wonder, like, what did we not get to know of her, Right. And at least with Ebony, they're showing more of who she is and giving her more of a voice. And I know it's a tricky space for Ebony. I don't think she could say like, oh, they're just showing more of it. I think she's going to have to, like, in some ways she can't say editing. It's hard. You're just not supposed to, but like, but but I think it's important to acknowledge that like the part that has changed is like the importance that Bravo's putting on like these other stories that are not like white women's stories. That's what's changed. And it needs to stay this way. It needs to grow deeper so that like people like that so we get to see more people that look, you know, like Ebony, because Ebony's amazing, but Ebony is like, you know, she's amazing as a Black woman, just like many other Black women are amazing, you know, in a way, but just have like in real life, they also don't get hurt. They get like cut over, you know, does that make sense what I'm saying?
Oh no, it totally does. It totally does.
Yeah. She has to be, you know, she has to be careful, but I kind of wish she would say like, I'm lucky that that my time on a show is happening after this reckoning happened.
Right. And I'm glad too that, you know, they picked a woman who like, you can't say she's uneducated. You can't say like, you can't like she's.
Unless I have a doctorate degree and I'm faculty at Harvard, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying like, I don't know. I don't remember what the other Black woman was, but like, I don't think that like, I think that like almost every Black woman that they have picked,
right,
like tends to be better educated, more interesting lives than the white cast. Like they just do. But unfortunately, the story doesn't get told in the way that that's where the like you know, Ebony is getting to own it. And in some ways, I kind of felt like other people talked about my and I talk about my education, but it's not it's not what I lead with. It's not like, you know, I think it's important, but it's like I'm a whole human being. And Ebony's education becomes a problem when it becomes clearly a problem for the white people. And I think like going into my show, the white people had a hard time with how educated I was as well.
Right. It makes sense. Makes sense.
I mean, it's interesting. I just think it's interesting. Like, I think that they probably, the thing that I'm saying, I think that like, I don't know this other person, Burnell or
Bershawn, I think it is.
Bershawn. It'll be interesting to see what Bershawn is like. Because I think that I call it the Matt James effect. Now, Matt James is a Black, the first, you know, bachelor of African heritage. We'll say he's biracial because he calls himself biracial. So I don't call him the first Black bachelor. He calls himself biracial. But I think ABC like wanted to they did this thing in response, but not recognizing what people wanted to see. And I'm almost curious if the Bershawn is like the Matt James of this, and they decided to go with somebody with Ebony who was much more like, you know, like much more clear about like speaking up against racism. Because when I spoke up, like I think in some ways I think on some level they thought I would be more like Matt James, right? Like, you know, like just the cool Black chick. And I am, but I'm not your starter Black friend because I will call you out in a heartbeat. And I feel like Ebony is like, I'm not your starter Black friend, you know? And Garcelle's like, I think Garcelle, maybe she was like that last season and now we're actually going to see it this season. Yeah. I don't know. I just kind of feel like you're going to see a much more, I don't know if the women are more vocal or you're just going to now see women like the Black women speaking or women of color speaking up in a way that we've never seen before.
Because after, the funny thing is because after this week, and then I remembered that Bershawn was coming on, my thought was, okay, are they bringing her in for backup with Ebony? That was my first thought.
Right.
You know, are they bringing her in to, you know,
I wish that they would, but like if they were really going to do that, they probably would have brought in another person. Like, I don't know what Bershawn's education and whatnot is, but I heard that she was like friends with Ramona or something like that. I don't know.
Because someone, and this is just hearsay, I heard that she gets into it more, like Bershawn gets into it with them. And so that's why I was like, oh, I was wondering if Bershawn, when she came in, knew what went down with Ebony and it was kind of like, oh, hell no. There's two of us now.
I would love that. I would love that. I would love that. I would love that if that were to happen, because I think that Black women need support. And I think that Leah is trying to do it, but I don't think Leah can, you know, I think it's almost feeling like Leah's like, you know, I can't speak because I don't know Leah. I can't speak to it clearly, but when I watch it, I'm like, I think Leah is doing it for her sense of self, right? I don't see it as like she's still taking care of Ebony. And I said that in the room the other day. You know, when Ebony's publicist friend was in there, I was really clear that like that bothered me the most, that like it just doesn't seem like people are aware. They don't have a pulse and an eye on Ebony and how hard this is for her. And she's taking care of everybody else. So like I would love if Rashawn came there and they got to be like each other's like sis through this process, because Black women, we need that. I'm sure you probably need that, like in your experience, like having a black man who like has your back, and you can talk to and you can give each other the eye. Like that's a powerful thing, you know?
Right. And just, you know, just someone who's like, yeah, I like, even someone just to say, I get it, you know?
Right. With trauma, like we're talking about trauma, with trauma, you know, say for instance, like when somebody's like has a history of like sexual abuse in their family, one of the most important things that they can have is somebody witnessing and saying, I believe that this happened. I believe you. Right. Like we all need to feel like our trauma, our experience is witnessed, because a lot of time, if it's not very obvious or if it's not public, often the way that racism is not like so obvious. Like the most painful ones are not so obvious. We need for somebody to say, I see this. I see the pain that it caused you.
And it was so funny because you mentioned a Freudian slip earlier. It was so funny because at the time that I was going through what I was going through with the ex, I wrote plays about it and performed the plays with exactly what I was going through.
Oh my God, I would love to see that.
Oh, sure. I'll dig up some I have them on tape somewhere. I'll send you some. And I ended up getting like 3 shows out of this, which now talking to you, I realize, oh, that's why I did that, because I had no one to back me up. And that was my outlet. I didn't realize I was doing it as my outlet, but that's what I did.
Right. My coming to Clubhouse, I think, has been like my outlet, you know, like, you know, it's been, you know, for me, it's like when you do this kind of a thing, you know, like a narrative really was constructed for me. And as I've said before, like if you go back and watch the show, like whenever there's something about me in a conflict, it's never me talking about it. It's never me talking about my experience. It's none of that, you know. It's always everybody else saying, this is what Monica was saying, this is what Monica was doing, this is who Monica is. I'm never saying to myself, this is what it feels like, this is what it, you know, this is who I am. Like that just doesn't happen in the edit of the show. And I feel like part of the healing for me, and I think that every person who has gone through traumatic experiences, really every Black or person of color who's gone through traumatic experiences around race, publicly is harder, which is what happened for me. And now when I say I was traumatized, I really was I lost sleep. And even like more recently, like when our premiere date happened and seeing some of the stuff Ebony went through, it was hard. Like it just triggered a lot of stuff. But being on Clubhouse and having the opportunity to actually speak to the audience of people who watch the show through my own voice, and then like actually be seen as a more whole person, that has also been healing, because it feels like my character is being witnessed. Right.
And I didn't know about, and it's so funny because when I watched this stuff, like the stuff going on with Ebony and Luann, I realized that I genuinely get hurt. Like my feelings get hurt watching it.
It's painful.
Yeah.
It's painful. It was painful, I think, for everybody watching it. Right. In the past, I think it would have only been painful for Black people because we would have known the backstory. But I think the fact that they're showing even more of the story, I think it's painful for white people to watch.
Yeah. So one last question. Would you do reality television again?
If I were to, so the answer is I would do television again. I would never do like, you know, like I guess scripted and fiction. I think that like I would do television the way that I had done it, you know, like before, where I show up as an expert, as myself, as like, you know, Dr. Monica. And I feel like if I were to ever do television, you know, like, sure, I would do reality television again, but I would like to do it in the way that I'm able to do in the Psych of Bravo, where I get to talk about things that are really interesting from an interesting point of view and get to have humor around it. And, you know, and like ask people things that like, I think that, because my nature is I'll ask people stuff out of curiosity, but it like, I wanted to spark a good conversation. So that's what I would do. It would be like something that allows me to be who I am and to engage with people and people. Like, if you can imagine, I would love to be able to be like a mix between like an Oprah and like even Andy Cohen, with him like being a little shady and funny, but with always having like a panel of people that like flip in and out and we talk about really interesting stuff. Like, that's what I would love to do.
I could see you doing that.
Dr. Phil. Yeah, I think it would be great. And I would love to help people. Like, I would love for people just to like see themselves differently and learn things, or to, you know, or for people to get to know them. I would love to do something that is meaningful, if I could do it. And I would definitely want to have a voice in it. This time.
Well, let's hope, because I would watch that show.
Would you watch it? I mean, you come to my room, which I'm so grateful. You have to have the Bravo docket women come on your into the room.
Yes.
They were phenomenal. They were way better than I could have ever hoped for. They have to come into the detective agency.
Yes. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And actually, the funny thing is, after you guys mentioned it yesterday, we followed each other. So we all follow each other. So
that's awesome. I think it's great.
And I got to tell you, I love your room, because one of my favorite rooms so far of yours is when you had Leanne Locken on.
Oh, that was good.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, because when she was going through, you know, her traumas and when she spelled everything out, I was like, oh, and I see her differently now.
Right.
I totally see her differently.
People said that about Bronwyn too. People said that about Bronwyn.
That one too.
Like, yeah, I see her differently. You know what I feel like is really fascinating? People also reached out to me. They were like, in all of when I've had people on the show, like, you know, Bronwyn, Leanne, and also now with this, with Mary from the Housewives of DC, they're like, there are these moments when you ask them questions that I know what you're getting at. And they were like, and you ask them in a way that is like to try to force them to go deeper and to think. And like, you know, and Bronwyn did it. Leanne had a hard time doing it, but eventually she did it. Mary just didn't do it at all. Right. You know, but like, because I asked, I don't know if you remember, I don't know if you're there.
Mary's, I would love, yeah.
So Mary, I would ask her the question of like, well, did you decide to then disclose your divorce on television to compete with the Salahi story? You know, like if they were getting all the shine, because like the fame piece is an important, you know, like there's an important piece to it. And I was like, is that why you did this? And she was like, no. And I was like, okay. Like, I would have liked to hear her say, maybe, you know?
Because that's right. Because I was listening to that, because that was like because wasn't she saying that like the show was going one way and then the Salahis did their thing and they basically sucked up the energy of the show? Right. Yeah, that's right. I remember that.
Right. And I was like, were you trying to take back some of this, like take back some of the shine by sharing something that you know, that you thought might like make you a bigger part of the story, which is part of human nature, I think, right?
Yes. Yeah. And the fact that she didn't sound happy, even when she was talking about it, you could tell she wasn't happy about them sucking up the energy of the show. You could tell.
Right. Exactly. And so I think with Leanne, it was something else too. I think I pushed her to ask, I was asking her like, Leanne, how do you take up ownership in this dynamic with these women? You know, because I do think that's an important piece too. Because at first I was like, you are a victim to a lot of different things and they did like mistreat you and whatever, but you were part of it. Like where do you see that you were part of it? And she heard me eventually and she answered. I was really proud of her for that. Yeah.
Well, if you listeners are wondering what we are talking about, you need to get onto Clubhouse. You need to get and check out Dr. Monica's room. What is the exact name of the room?
It's called The Psychology of Bravo. It's very easy to remember. It's The Psychology of Bravo, and it's really just about all things that are happening in the Bravo cinematic universe. I love that, by the way. The Bravo cinematic universe. I have other Bravo Labs come through. I have like experts like Les and other people come through. I have like, you know, journalists from other like, you know, big media journals come through, and we just talk about what is happening in the here and now in the present on Bravo. And sometimes the Bravo Labs will come and talk about their experience. I want them to feel seen and heard, and I want them to leave the stage feeling full and good. And thus far, it has happened every single time. And I'm really proud of that. And I hope to continue being able to do that because I know the importance of now wanting to feel heard and seen. I get it.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, it's funny because I just keep on forgetting the name of the room because I'm like, I just call it Dr. Dr. Monica's on. I'm gonna go.
Right. Well, right, exactly. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm gonna interrupt you.
Oh, and I was just gonna say, how would you? Where can we find you? Where can the listeners find you?
Oh yes, absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at Dr.Monica. You can find me on Clubhouse at Dr. Monica. You can find me on Twitter as Dr. Monica O'Neill. And truly, if you really wanted to know, you can just Google me and say Dr. Monica and I should pop up. To be honest with you, I know that sounds weird. Google me, Google-G-O-O-G-L-E, me.
Oh, no, not
You'll find me. You'll find me. Yeah, you'll definitely find me. I don't know what will come up. I don't know if Camp Getaway will come up. I don't know if like the Psychology of Bravo will come up. I don't know if Harvard's going to come up. I don't even know if my practice in Boston's going to come up, but you'll find me. And I would love for you to follow me. Honestly, I just am a human being who likes to have fun. I post photos of my dog, post photos of me in a bikini after I took off 20 pounds during the pandemic, honey. I am a real person. I just try to have a good time on all of those things, but I own who I am as a psychologist and I love that. And, in the room. But yeah, I just want to have a good time and I just want people to have a good time with me and learn something and open up their heart for a new experience.
Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. Well, Dr. Monica, thank you for coming on. This has been fun. Oh my God, I didn't think we were talking that long. We've been talking for over like an hour and a half. That's crazy.
Well, yeah, you're going to have to edit some of it out. I'm long-winded. I'm Southern. I'm long-winded. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm long-winded too. So I am too.
I love their voice though. I really honestly I love your voice. I don't know why you're not on radio.
Hey, I would love to be.
You would do great.
I'm starting to get into voiceovers actually. I actually did my first professional voiceover over the summer.
That is it. 100%. 100% I see that.
So I'm totally leaning in that direction for sure.
Okay, time to get an agent,
Yeah. It's so funny because I'm an actor and I have like a regular acting agent, but a voiceover, it's like a whole different thing. So basically I got to start from scratch with the whole voiceover thing, but it's in the works.
Well, get on, use Clubhouse for that. Find if there's voiceover rooms.
Oh yeah.
And that's how you connect with people. But that's amazing. I think it's great. You're gonna be so good at it.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And everyone else, hey, keep reading. Bye.
Yes. Bye.